Hello my friends, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to another episode of Spooky Snack, a series on my channel where I talk about spooky things while turning myself into a snack. If you are new here, welcome. This is probably one of the best times for you to have come across my channel because spooky season has officially started. And this is truly your girl's time of year. This channel is completely dedicated to all things spooky, ooky, scary, and what better time than to celebrate it than during spooky season in October, my absolute favorite month of the year. I have not done a spooky snack in quite some time. I think the last time I posted one was back in August, maybe September, I don't fully remember, but it's been a minute since I did them, so I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous because I really hope I can still give some good storytelling to you guys, but I guess we'll see. For today's story, we're going to be talking about the story of the Headless Horseman, who is an iconic, notorious, spooky character. It is like a folklore story that I feel like the story is usually thought about more surrounding Halloween, and I've always found the story of the Headless Horseman super interesting. So without further ado, let's get into the Headless Horseman. Now, usually my spooky snack stories are based more so on haunted locations and not necessarily haunted figures or characters, I should say. But this story, The Headless Horseman, does basically tell the story of a town, the legend of Sleepy Hollow, which, yes, there's a movie, there's a book, everything. I'm basically going to be discussing the story of the Headless Horseman from Sleepy Hollow. The legend of Sleepy Hollow tells the story of Ichabod Crane and his hapless attempts to win the heart and hand of Katrina Van Tassel. Ichabod comes to Sleepy Hollow, New York, leaving his home state of Connecticut to be the schoolmaster of the village there. The town of Sleepy Hollow itself is really small and rather quiet, and it's said to be in some sort of enchantment, if you will. All of its residents seem to just move a little slower, daydream a little bit more, and are more inclined to question and believe in the supernatural. And Sleepy Hollow itself has had more than its fair share of odd occurrences of the supernatural, or at least the stories of them. And Sleepy Hollow's most famous supernatural occurrence is the ghost of the Headless Horseman, who is said to be a soldier who lost his head to a cannonball during the American Revolutionary War. The Headless Horseman is supposedly most often seen over by the church, where historians claim that that's where he was buried, and he's always in search of his head. Now, Ichabod is extremely fascinated by this story because he in general is really fascinated also by the supernatural. Now, as most school teachers even today can relate to, Ichabod doesn't make very much money in his schoolmaster position, and because of this, it's very customary in the village for the farmers whose sons he would teach would feed and board Ichabod in like a rotation. So he was often staying over at various of his students' houses. And along with this, Ichabod would make a little extra money by giving singing lessons because he was supposedly very proud of his magnificent singing voice. So this arrangement really worked out for Ichabod. He was not only able to make some extra money to keep himself employed, but he would also hear a lot of ghost stories from the farmers' wives while he was having dinner with them and the farmers' daughters. Now, Katrina Van Tassel was supposedly a beautiful young woman at the age of 18, so thankfully she wasn't underage when this story is happening, but a beautiful young woman who happened to be one of Ichabod's students. She also was the only child of Baltus Van Tassel, who was one of the most successful farmers in the town. Now, Ichabod was quickly overtaken by her charm, but it's said that he was especially interested in her after he first visited her father's farm, and that's when he considered himself truly in love with her, or seemingly just really in love with her possible inheritance one day. So he quickly sets out on a mission to try to win her hand in marriage. So he's often visiting that farm specifically to try to woo her into falling in love with him. However, Ichabod was not the only one interested in Katrina and her possible inheritance. Her beauty, charm, and wealth caught the eye of many other suitors, especially Bram van Brunt, also known as Bram Bones. Now, Bram was notorious for his very animated personality. He really loved pranks, and he was a really skilled horseback rider. So he was kind of seen as like the village hero, the village good guy. Like, everyone loved Bram. Now, Bram had already been able to discourage a lot of Katrina's other suitors, but Ichabod specifically was a little bit harder to get rid of. Bram's usual main method of intimidation was through physical altercations, but Ichabod made sure to never interact in any physical confrontation with Bram, and this definitely frustrated Bram because this usually worked out really easily for him. So because of this, Bram decided to turn towards his other thing that he was really good at, playing pranks. Bram was truly doing the most. He was filling the schoolhouse with smoke, sending a dog to follow Ichabod and howl around him every time, and many other pranks just to upset, frustrate and humiliate Ichabod. Now one day, a messenger arrives at the schoolhouse to invite Ichabod, or give Ichabod an invitation to the Van Tassel's party. And at this party, he is said to believe that he was basically the best man in the house. I'm not exactly sure why, but he thought he was hot shit while he was there. And so when the party is over, he chooses to stay behind. So Ichabod basically decides to finally put his move on to Katrina. And it's said that she disappointed him. I think by that they mean that she rejected him and he was feeling some type of way, so he left. So he's on his way home and he kind of realizes that the path that he's taking home feels kind of eerily dark and quiet. So he tries to keep himself from feeling too scared, but soon after he passes by the supposedly haunted Major Andre's tree, he realizes that there's a dark, large figure looming by the tree heading towards him. The figure would not respond to any of his calls, but soon after he started passing by it, the figure seemed to start following him, getting onto the path that he was taking. Now Ichabod realizes that this figure is riding a rather large dark horse. He tries to shake off his pursuer, get them to stop following him, but he just can't seem to lose them. And that's when he notices that the rider that's following him doesn't have a head. And in fact, the head appears to be sitting in the saddle in front of the man riding the horse. Now obviously this freaks out Ichabod even more, and so he's trying to get his horse to rush home as fast as possible. However, his horse is rather weak and Ichabod himself is not that great of a horseback rider, so his horse just kept resisting him the entire time. Now eventually Ichabod and his pursuer end up nearby the church, which is the scene of most of the Headless Horseman's incidents. And Ichabod races over to the bridge where the ghost is said to disappear and not be able to follow over the bridge. So as him and his horse cross the bridge, he turns around to make sure that his pursuer disappears or at least isn't following him anymore, only to find that he's still being pursued, and in fact, this Headless Horseman is literally chucking his head at Ichabod. The head does hit Ichabod and he ends up falling off of his horse. Now, the next morning, Ichabod's horse makes it back to the owner's farm, but there's no sign of Ichabod whatsoever. So a search party goes out and search for him. They find a bunch of hoof prints and Ichabod's hat near the bridge, and next to it is a smashed pumpkin. And from then on, Ichabod is never seen or heard from in Sleepy Hollow ever again. Now, some people in the story believed that Ichabod truly was then captured by the Headless Horseman afterward, or, was truly captured by the Headless Horseman. Others believe Bram Bones was able to finally pull off the last and final prank necessary because not long after Ichabod left town, Bram and Katrina got married. Now, the legend of a decapitated horseman spans across various European cultures. For example, the Dullahan, or the Dark Man, was a malevolent harbinger of death whose roots lie in Celtic mythology. He is said to be the embodiment of the fertility god who demanded blood sacrifices in the form of decapitation. Now, eventually, once Christianity began to take more form, it's said that the Dark Man was frustrated by his loss of his sacrifices, and therefore he roams the roads, calling the names of those who are doomed to die, and carrying his own head under his arms. The Dullahan is recorded in the Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry, edited by W.B. Yeats, as saying, quote, an omen that sometimes accompanies the banshee in the cochaboer, an immense black coach mounted by a coffin and drawn by headless horses, driven by a Dullahan. It will go rumbling to your door, and if you open it, a basin of blood will be thrown in your face. These headless phantoms are found elsewhere than in Ireland. In Norway, the heads of corpses were cut off to make their ghosts powerless. Thus came into existence the Dullahans. End quote. Now, the process of beheading corpses to ensure that their spirits don't roam recalls the origins of another very famous Irish horror creation, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I said Stokers, right? Not Strokers. Stokers. It's Stokers. There's only one R and it's at the end, not Strokers. You know when you're like rethinking what you just said and you're like, wait, did I say that right? And you don't remember. I meant to say Stokers if I accidentally said Strokers. Okay. Now, Stoker lived in an area where the practice of burying corpses with a stake through its chest at the burial plot was another form of trying to make sure that the spirit of the person who passed away did not resurrect. So obviously it's not difficult to see the parallels between these stories. Because as I mentioned, also in some other areas it was common to, instead of doing the stake through the heart, to decapitate corpses to make sure that their spirits don't wander the earth. Now obviously the most famous and lasting iteration of the Dullahan figure comes through the Headless Horseman, which was done in Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which, like I said, is set in rural New York. Rural. I never know how to pronounce it. I feel like it's when you start to overthink the word rural, it starts to just sound not right. The horseman takes form of a Hessian soldier who lost his head during the American Revolutionary War and usually carries around a replacement head as a pumpkin or, in some forms, a jack-o'-lantern. And of course, while riding a black horse. Now, Franz Potter, who is a professor at National University who specializes in Gothic studies, says that the Headless Horseman as a supernatural entity represents a past that never dies but always haunts the living. He says, quote, the Headless Horseman supposedly seeks revenge and a head, which he thinks was unfairly taken from him. This injustice demands that he continually search for a substitute. The horseman, like the past, still seeks answers, still seeks retribution, and can't rest. We are haunted by the past, which stalks us so that we never forget about it. End quote. Now, as for any real life experiences or stories that would have created the Headless Horseman, as for folklore mixing with history, when it comes to the character of Ichabod Crane, the New York Times reports that there was an actual Colonel Ichabod B. Crane, who was a contemporary of Washington Irving, who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and they were both enlisted in the Marines in 1809. So they served together for 45 years. But there's no evidence that the two actually ever met or interacted with one another. It's just assumed that because they were enlisted in the Marines together, that Irving probably at least heard the guy's name. Now, as for actual sightings or reports of the Headless Horseman, I couldn't find anything reputable that actually shows that the Headless Horseman has actually ever been seen as an actual ghost. It seems like the overall consensus is that the Headless Horseman is really just a piece of folklore or lore, if you will. Like, it's really not a like ghost story or an experience with ghosts that people then turned into a story. So, but if you have any reports or even personal experiences of people who have claimed to see the Headless Horseman in real life, please let me know in the comments, because I really couldn't find any. There was one story that actually was really cute of in Sleepy Hollow, because around Halloween time, obviously, the story gets told a lot more. There's this bus driver that he loved to tell the story to the kids that would ride in his bus. He would always tell them the Headless Horseman story. And so one year he decided to ask his friend who owned a horse stable if they could dress up like the Headless Horseman and come out of the trees on his route, so that way the kids could claim to see the Headless Horseman. So I thought that was super cute, but otherwise I couldn't find any actual like reputable instances of people who have claimed to have experienced seeing the Headless Horseman. I will say though, either way, the Headless Horseman is such an iconic Halloween figure and just paranormal experience, so as much as it kind of sucks that no one's actually claimed to have seen it, or if they have, I just couldn't find it, I still think that the idea of the Headless Horseman is so like just spooky ooky and just very Halloween. It's like a very classic Halloween story. Okay, but let me put on the finishing touches to this costume and then we will wrap this up. Alrighty guys, and this is my finished vampire look. It is kind of hard to talk with these fangs in because obviously I'm not used to having fangs, but I have a little bit of a lisp. Hopefully it's not too bad, but my thoughts on the Headless Horseman, I mean, I kind of covered it already. I really like the lore behind the Headless Horseman. It would be super dope to actually see the Headless Horseman, or to see like photos of people who supposedly saw the Headless Horseman, but yeah, I mean, otherwise, I think the story is really interesting. Based on the fictional story itself, I feel like obviously Bram probably just pulled a prank on Ichabod and managed to finally get him out of the way and so he could marry Katrina, but I still think, however, that the story itself is really cool and really interesting. So, let me know what you guys thought of the story. Did you like it? Have you experienced the Headless Horseman yourself or anyone that you know? Or have you found any like reputable articles or experiences that people have claimed to have ran into the Headless Horseman? Let me know what you guys think of my vampire costume. I think it's honestly really good. The last time I dressed up these teeth. Okay, the last time I dressed up as a vampire I think was maybe middle or high school, you know, like that was the last time I did a vampire costume for Halloween. And this is my like grown up kind of like hot vampire look. I'm loving my eyeshadow and how my like blood drips came out, because I actually used these Suva Beauty water-based eyeliners because I didn't want to get like a whole thing of fake blood, because I was literally only going to do like just like this. And I have red and black, so I was like, oh, if I mix it together to make like a dark red, hopefully, since they're water-based too, like it'll be easy and it'll dry and look good. And honestly, I kind of love it. And then my teeth obviously are, I got them from Spirit Halloween. They're those like customizable ones. Yeah, let me know what you guys think of my costume. If you'd like to see the full look, like with my outfit and everything, check out my Instagram. I will be posting every costume's like full look over on my Instagram. I'll leave the link down in the description below. Otherwise, I hope you guys are enjoying my spooky content so far this month. Make sure that you like if you did, and also subscribe down below so you don't miss out on the future spooky content that we have coming up for October. We've got more spooky stories, some podcast episodes, of course, ghost reactions, because I know you guys really like those. And plenty of awesome costumes to come. I'm so excited. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week also, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.